only observe in the places where we are explicitly allowed to observe. So we're observing in some red states, some blue states, and also some toss-up, and curiously enough, some that have actually kind of become toss-up in the last few days. I would say another curious factor that usually doesn't happen in our electoral observation missions. So it is now 8:10 in the morning, and 80 million people have already voted. 80 million have already voted. How many of our countries have 80 million people? Very few. They have already voted. So voting started a while ago. And it started a while ago in very different ways. It started with early voting. You get in line and you vote. A week before, it started with mail-in ballots, and it started with the drop boxes. So 3 different types of voting. And I don't know if you're going to the 3 areas of the DMV, well, you'll see different types of voting today as well. You'll also see a lot of provisional ballots or even tendered ballots, and you'll get an explanation from the voting officers there and the poll workers there. Another thing that you have to be wary about that we don't see in a lot of our countries is you will see long lines. And today's not a Sunday. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's a work day. Yeah. It's not a Sunday, it's a work day, it's a Tuesday. You will see really long hours, long lines, especially during lunchtime. That's the time people get off a couple of hours to be able to go and vote. So my recommendation to you is, if it's lunchtime and there's a long line, go have lunch, because the poll workers will not want to speak to you at lunchtime. That's something that we've learned in the last few elections here.
Thank you. Ulvi, please, in terms of ODIHR and your observation efforts and the methodology and your approach.
Sure. Look, you're very familiar with the way how international organizations go about deploying observation activities, observation missions. For us, the process started in March of this year, when the US government, when the State Department invited us to observe. In response to that invitation, we deployed a needs assessment mission, which was in the country in May, and we published the report basically recommending the type of the mission that we need to deploy and the issues that that mission needs to focus on as part of the deployment. From this perspective, we treat all our states equally, because we get an invitation and we respond by deploying a needs assessment mission. And, but the needs of our states differ, and that's why we ended up, for example, recommending a full-fledged election observation mission with short-term observer component to Moldova or Georgia or Uzbekistan just recently. It's because people that we spoke to, they told us that there are concerns about election day procedures, election day peculiarities, and so on and so forth. Here in the United States, the problems that we identified through numerous meetings were of a long-term nature. Those that would require a longer presence in the country and also presence across the country. That's why we deployed the so-called limited election observation mission, which started its work in the US on 12th of September, and they're around for quite some time now. It's a core team of experts dealing with different issues: electoral administration, legal framework, campaign finance, media coverage, you name it. They're based in Washington, D.C. They were joined by 64 long-term observers that we received from our states. They're seconded, so to say, to do the job in the regions across the country. We are covering through these observers, some of them are deployed to 2 states throughout the deployment, 48 states altogether. There are some states, as Gerardo mentioned, which explicitly prohibit presence of international observers, and we respect this approach, we respect this legal limitation, yet we mention it in our reports, and we are critical about it because if as a country committed to invite international observers, we expect that across all the states there is an unimpeded access for international observers. But the regulations and approaches vary across the states. Since 2002, through our deployments to the United States, we learned how to deal with it. In 2016, we had a full-fledged election observation mission, and we had a couple of hundred short-term observers arriving a week prior to election day. And we were talking with Gerardo yesterday, and he said, how did you arrange for it? And I said, well, you know, our deputy head of mission, at the end of the day, if you looked at him, he had a visible asymmetry on his face, because one ear was actually larger than the other one, and the reason was because he spent so many hours on the phone talking to individual state secretaries or election directors, our county representatives, just to make sure that they're aware that international observers are coming and will be observing elections. From this perspective, the US experience is very unique, because in many other countries, or maybe in most of our countries, in OEC countries, we get an invitation. There is one central body that is responsible for accreditation. Documents are submitted, accreditations are received, we are deployed throughout the country, and we have full access to all aspects of electoral process. And, but US is very different in many ways because of that. And it's fascinating to see how things change, and how, for example, some states, in the context of this particular election, although they were welcoming observers in 2022, there is less openness in some states in the context of these elections, not because they're not welcoming us, but because of the perceived perception of foreign interference. Them talking to us could be seen by constituencies as allowing for foreign interference. And this is something that we will discuss later, I think. It's one of these elements that makes this election very unique for us, because as part of our observation work, we also try to raise awareness of the individual stakeholders of who we are and why it is important to welcome international observers, and why it's useful to have this impartial, professional assessment of the electoral process that can benefit individual counties, states, and also at the federal level in terms of refining and improving electoral processes in the years to come. I'm the deputy of election department. My boss is an American. Mm-hmm. And the reason why she's not here is because we have a strict policy of nationals of the countries not allowed to deal with the elections in their respective countries. So we start from this impartiality notion inside the department, because it's so important for us, the perceptions and how we're seen by the electoral administrators, by the authorities in the countries that we visit, that we're impartial. We come here to any country without preconceived ideas. We assess the elections and different aspects of the electoral process against the standards and international commitments that countries voluntarily accepted, and we produce our reports. We will release our statement of preliminary findings and conclusions tomorrow at 3 o'clock at the press conference, which will be held at another Marriott, Marriott at Metro Center. The capacity of our conference room is not as big as this one, but we are cordially welcome to both attend in person, but also follow our press conference online.
Thank you. You were talking about some of the misconceptions around international election observers. Can you speak a bit more about some of those misconceptions?
In my view, one of the key misconceptions is that we come with an agenda, and we come with the aim to criticize and to find wrongdoings or issues in the electoral process. We are here to support, and we're here to, or in any other country, to provide impartial, professional, technical assessment of the process, and to provide recommendations that will be later on used to refine and improve the electoral process for the benefit of the people. Another misconception is that there is a bias in what we do. There are methodological ways how we mitigate any potential risk of being perceived bias, because we deploy in the multinational teams of 2, and the team has to really agree on what they report to the headquarters. It's impossible that, we get 2 different reports from the team. They have to agree on what they see, what they receive from the discussions or interactions with the electoral authorities, and then we do not, individual assessment and individual observations are important, but it's the collective picture that matters for us. We gather this information from across the states, from all our observers, and it's based on this collective picture that we deliver our assessment of the electoral process. I think in the context of US, there is also this very peculiar feature, and that is it's a well-established democracy, and US supports democratic development in countries across the world, and sometimes we see this pushback from the electoral administrators at the local level. Who are you? Where are you from? You're from Azerbaijan? How come you come and assess our elections? And yes, we have observers who come from countries with imperfect democracies, problematic elections, yet before we deploy them, we make sure that they are properly trained, they know what to look at, they know issues that they need to focus on, they are properly briefed, and they work based on universally agreed within our community of international observers, this declaration of principles for international election observation. We religiously follow the letter and the spirit of that declaration, plus we're also bound, by our own code of conduct. So, yeah.
Yeah, if you can speak about the declaration and the code of conduct, and then some of the misconceptions.
Well, a couple of the misconceptions, I think Ulvi spoke well to the general misconceptions about observation, but here in the US, first of all, most activities within the electoral process are bipartisan. So when people are talking about observers, they think about Republican and Democrat observers. They are the ones who are here in charge of taking care of the election. Even in some cases, for instance, if you want certain access to certain material of the election, there are two swipe cards, one for the Republican and one for the Democrat. And they have to sometimes even do it at the same time to be able to access certain machinery or certain elements of the election. So I would say that's one misconception, is that they just don't know what international observation does here in the US. The second thing is that we can also be confused with a figure of the Justice Department called electoral monitors. And electoral monitors can actually intervene in the process. Electoral observers cannot. So that's part of one of the most challenging aspects that you will probably see today, and certainly that happens to us quite often, is that we get trained not only on how to observe an election, but also we get trained on how the electoral system of that country works. And so you're there in, this won't happen here in the US because poll workers have done it over and over again, and they're really good at the job. But sometimes you're in a polling place and you see that the electoral workers are doing a bad job. They're not counting correctly. They started doing one thing instead of doing the other. You know they're going to have to start counting all over again, and you can't do anything. You can't tell them, hey, listen, it's not that bad. You have to use this one. No, that is a big no-no for observers. Monitors from the Justice Department can do that. And that takes me to a couple of more challenges of the US system. One is issuing recommendations. If you have different systems and such different criteria, it's hard to issue general recommendations. Examples: some states require voting ID, some states don't. How do you issue a general recommendation on that? Some states, you have several types of different types of voting. Some, you only have one type of voting. Some states have a districting, which is a huge issue here with gerrymandering, and I'm sure you've heard about this in the past few days. Some have an impartial body designing the districts. Others, it's completely partial. So how do you issue these recommendations in a general sense? You kind of learn, or the way we do it, is we take the best experiences internationally, but also locally, and we say, listen, this state has figured this thing out, and maybe other states should look at that. We also try to get more federal agencies like the EAC and the FEC involved in having a little bit more teeth into the electoral process. But there are a lot of challenges that we face in this observation that we tend not to face in others. And I would conclude with the last difference from our mission here than from our missions other places in Latin America and the Caribbean, is that we don't have statistical samples. We don't have a quick count. Because for us to have a quick count, we would need to have, I don't know, perhaps 50 or 60 observers in each state, because each state in itself has their own election. And usually, if we have a mission in a medium-sized country of the region, we can have a statistical sample with around 80 observers, 60 observers. We can have a decent-sized sample to know with some margin of error what the results that are being presented and what the different areas that we are studying have been presented by the electoral management body. Here, we will have some of our, let's say, groundwork will be done. So we will have our observers filling in their questionnaires, but they won't be all the questionnaires that we do. And it will really, for us to get a sense of more the outliers in the process than the general sense of the process.
Thank you. If you have any questions for our panelists, please do put them in the app. We can take questions through the app. Thank you, Gerardo. Thank you, Ovi. In terms of the International Declaration of Principles and the Code of Conduct, can you share with our participants and witnesses the do's and the don'ts in terms of some of the advice when you're training your observers to go out, appreciating the peculiarities of the U.S. context? What would be advice that you would give to your observers?
Maybe I'll do 3 and you do.
All right.
Yeah.
Not the same 3.
Okay. The key advice when we deploy our observers is do not interfere. That's the key. As Gerardo mentioned, whatever happens and you see perhaps something incorrect from legal procedural perspective unfolding in front of your eyes, do not interfere. Second is do not comment on what you see to the media. In our missions, we have a very strict policy. It's only the head of mission who is authorized to speak on behalf of the organization, on behalf of the mission, and even head of the mission will not give you any assessment of what he or she has seen at any given polling station, because it's the collective picture. Remember that I mentioned collective picture that we care about, and that one will be presented only the day after at the press conference by us and our parliamentary partners. And the third one, perhaps, which is important in the US context, even in the states which allow for the presence of international observers, if you are asked to leave, if you ask not to enter the polling site, you do that. You follow the request, and in itself, it's a valid observation. You report on what you've been asked to leave, and you were not allowed to enter the polling site. That's it. And it's a very valid observation point. So adherence to local rules and regulations and the legal framework as observers is extremely important for us to remain impartial and for us to remain credible as an international observation body.
Thank you.
So these were very practical, and we've mentioned some as well, and these are the most practical aspects of, let's say, for the observer. Mm-hmm. But there are also some that guarantee the independence of the mission. So one is the financing of the mission. We do not take, and I know OSCE doesn't either, any sort of support or financing from the member state that we are observing. So that's a first one that grants us a lot of independence. The second is that we do not, although we tell them the general area or the state where our observers will be deployed, we don't coordinate on exactly which polling place our observers will visit. So there is an element of surprise there that can be useful to our team. And I would say that another aspect is that we cannot take any foreign guidance. So no other member state can tell us or can sway our mission in any way. And I would say that the last general rule for our observation missions is that we do not take out of our report something that we observed, and we do not put in our reports something that we did not observe. And you would say, well, that's logical, but no. Member states sometimes will say to us, well, you didn't observe this and you didn't observe that, and we'll give them a chance to send us some sort of response or comments, and then we'll include that as an annex way in the back of the report. No, I was just joking. But that's one way. And also, we can talk about nuances of language in our reports. We can say, I remember in one case we were asked not to use the term vote buying, that we saw generalized vote buying. And so I think that we ended up using some sort of euphemism of the political parties donate to their voters in a very generous and extensive manner or something like that. But the fact that there was vote buying is in the report, although it's written in a different way.
Yeah. No, thank you. We do have one question. What is the nature of that? What is the nature of the intervention that election monitors can undertake?
The Justice Department electoral monitors. So I believe that in the case of the U.S., and you probably this is a decision by the Justice Department to send to a certain county electoral monitors because they believe that something is previously wrong, or they want to observe something in particular. I don't know if Ulvi knows if electoral monitors from the Justice Department have been sent to any of the states, but it's something that you can easily Google. But that is the reason for being is to go to a state and to issue recommendations and to intervene in a process that they're not seeing, that the Justice Department is not agreeing with.
To my knowledge, 27 states. The DOJ has deployed monitors for these elections to 27 states, but I don't have the number now of how many monitors are deployed.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see any other questions, and I know that there are a few housekeeping responsibilities in terms of getting you onto buses. I'm looking across the audience for colleagues in terms of identifying your specific bus site and the deployment of that. Yes, and so I will. No, she's not coming. Okay.
There is a question about taking pictures, right?
Okay. Yes, yeah. Please. Please
colleague,
answer.
Yeah, a colleague just mentioned that there is a question about taking pictures at the polling stations you will be visiting. I think one of the key things that was mentioned at the very beginning, the beauty of the exercise that you are part of, you are not observers, you are visitors, you are witnesses, but even so, the rules vary across the states, constituencies, and counties. There is no standard rule saying you can or cannot take pictures. Talk to the chief person at the station, polling station you are visiting, ask for the permission, and if it is allowed, then it is allowed. But if not, again, no secret filming, no secret picture taking, so it will just negatively impact the trust that you are also helping to build, and it's a massive group that will be out there today, although not being observers per se, but coming from so many different countries to observe US elections. You will be also bringing in and promoting this notion of opening the electoral processes to external scrutiny.
Thank you.
Can I just add a couple of things that you will see today that, I don't know, in many countries it's not allowed. You will see a lot of signs outside, campaign signs. You'll even see maybe even a candidate campaigning. In some states, people can even register to vote on election day and then issue a temporary ballot. And another thing that you'll see that is actually in some of the countries where we observe is not only shunned upon, it's illegal, is you will see an active movement of political parties to get people to go and vote. And maybe even giving them a box lunch or whatever, and that's completely fine. It's not seen as vote buying, it's seen as mobilizing your constituency. But also, remember that here, when you register to vote, you register as a political party or an independent. So you're registering to vote, and you're saying when you're registering to vote that you are a Democrat, or that you are a Republican, or that you are an independent. And the political parties have those lists, and they know who's voted and who hasn't. So they will be calling people, hey, you haven't voted, do you need a ride? I will go and pick you up, I will send you an Uber, I will send you a zip car, whatever you need to get to the voting place, and that is perfectly fine.
Thank you. Thank you. These are the experts, and really I am grateful to you to share some of this experience with our participants. And as you see, there is a methodology, there is an approach, there are guiding principles for the work of international election observers. On this stage, I think collectively we were discussing in the green room that 200 plus electoral observation efforts have been done across 50 countries amongst the three of us. And so really, really appreciate this conversation, really appreciate the information that has been shared. And so thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, happy witnessing. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. If everyone could please stay seated until your bus number is called, and then you'll have guides who will guide you up to the buses so you can load up. So please stay seated at this time until your bus number is called. Thank you. I'm going to call the first bus numbers. Please stay seated until your buses are called. The first bus numbers are 1, 3, 6, 10, 23, and 24. If you are on buses 1, 3, 6, 10, 23, or 34, please exit the room and you will be taken to load up your buses. Thank you. Again, we are loading up buses numbers 1, 3, 6, 10, 23, and 34. So if that is your bus number, please load up your bus now.